meaning other people, not the Hebrews, ruling over them. This is going to be a dark period of time for our Jewish friends here. So, the diaspora. Israel, remember, King Solomon wanted to build that awesome temple to God. His daddy David wanted to build it, but had too much blood in his hands, so Solomon winds up going and being the one to build it. It was amazing, it was incredible, and it was expensive. So all of those taxes wind up causing the northern kingdom of Israel to break away from the southern kingdom of Judah. Then, roughly 180 years or so, 200 years, we have the Assyrians coming through and conquering conquering Israel, I apologize. And it's one of those things, they're of course weaker now that they're not together. So because they're separate, they're more easily able to be defeated. And with how the land in Israel was, it wasn't as well defended, not as mountainous as Judah. And so we're going to see Israel fall to the Assyrian Empire. We've talked about the Assyrians an awful lot throughout history this year. We're talking about Mesopotamia. We talked about them dealing with the Egyptians. And now, once again, we're talking about them with our Hebrews. We see the Assyrians were a powerhouse. Now, this map right here, when you look at the Assyrian Empire, it's a little incorrect because actually it should be closer to this one right here where we see Jerusalem is not captured, because we're going to see Judah is going to hold out. So this one, the map maker was a little bit lazy bones. There should be a big cut in the middle of that one. Now, after the Assyrians go conquer Israel, they say, well, you rich, powerful Hebrews, we don't want you around. We don't want you going and convincing Lexi to rebel, saying, hey, C4, let's go overthrow these Assyrians. So the Assyrians did what they often did to other peoples, and they took their leaders and they brought them to Mesopotamia. They brought them to places like Nineveh, their capital, so they could be under the king's watch. They took other people and spread them all throughout their empire. So where you see this purple, where you see this green, they took people out of their homes and said, all right, guess what, Evelyn? You lived over here, now you're going to live over there. Oh, guess what there, Zoe? You lived over here, now you're going to live over there. You know, and they would do this to all of the people. They would mix them up because now you're living with people who don't speak the same language as you. You're living with people who don't have the same culture as you. The only thing you have in common is that you don't like the Assyrians, but because you speak different languages, have different backgrounds, different cultures, you're not able to unite against the Assyrians as well. Whereas they feared if they left Maddox and Riley and Khan and Danny all together in one spot, they would start talking, they'd start hiding weapons, and eventually try to overthrow the Assyrians. They know this because this happened lots of times because the Assyrians were so mean. Remember, the Assyrians were like the meanest people in history practically. Now, Judah, like I say, is able to withstand the Assyrians. They're able to hold up in their mountain fortresses, but they too are going to succumb to Babylon. Now, we know at this time period, we call them Babylon, but really, and the Old Testament calls them Babylon, but really this is the Neo-Babylonians, or better yet, calling them the Chaldean Empire. And so the Chaldean Empire is going to wind up conquering Judah in 597. So they will last, 130 more years than Israel, but they too are going to fall to stronger enemies. And this is where you might have been familiar with the guy King Nebuchadnezzar. He's a pretty famous Chaldean king. And King Nebuchadnezzar, he ruled over the people of Judah. He doesn't go send them anywhere, but he then goes and says, hey, guess what? This is going to be your new king. He's going to listen to me. You're going to listen to him, and it's going to be great. Now, this king was one of the Israelites. He was a Hebrew, so they had their own king. But the caveat was he couldn't rebel against the Babylonians, and he had to, listen to them. Now, what do you think? Is this going to work out? Is he going to listen? Is he going to be okay with some other power ruling them? Do a little poll. All right. Will the new king listen? Yes, no. Tell me, what do you think? Yes, no. Vote no. Come on, folks. You know how to do it. You just go hit over on the little triangle thingy. You then go to polls, and then you give me your vote. I need to see some votes. Okay, so right now we're getting some votes in. We have two folks saying yes, he will totally listen. 11 people so far saying no, and the answer is, of course, he would not listen. Unfortunately, so good job to all my no's in predicting the future. The king of Judah, he rebels. He says, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'll listen to you. Don't worry." This is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. So remember, Chaldean Empire, they were relatively kind to the people they ruled if they listened. But of course, the king of Judah rebels. So he's going to lay siege to the city. Siege, of course, means you surround it with your army. You don't let anyone or thing in or out of the city. That includes food. People are starting to starve. They, have, of course, have their catapult raining boulders on the city. They're shooting arrows into there. And eventually, when the food runs out, that is when the Chaldeans come in. That is when they come in, and it is not a good situation for the Hebrews. They go and burn Solomon's temple down to the ground. They destroy the temple. Then they take most of the people out of Judah and they take them to the city of Babylon. And they disperse other people throughout the whole Babylonian Empire. This is the Babylonian exile, where the people of Judea are taken from their homes and sent around the Babylonian Empire. So just like Karen said so beautifully, like she had a dictionary in her brain, they're kicked out of their home country. And this is the beginning of what we call the diaspora, the spreading of the Jewish people. Now, this is going to be a sad time where the Jewish people under the Assyrians and then the Chaldeans are going to be spread out all throughout the Fertile Crescent. This is going to continue up even through the Roman Empire, where they're going to wind up going and getting spread throughout the Mediterranean world. So this is the beginning of the diaspora, and we're going to see it's going to be a bummer for our Hebrew people, but it's going to actually have some interesting positive effects that we'll get to later on as well. Do we have any questions thus far? Oh man, like this whole story is real nasty. So like when the king rebels and they finally go take the city of Jerusalem, they pull out the king and his sons outside of the city walls, and this is horrible. The Chaldean king Nebuchadnezzar, he orders the king's sons killed, executed right in front of him. And then you know what he does? He takes out the eyes of the king, so that they say the last thing you ever saw was your actions causing the death of your sons. I mean, how heartbreaking is that? Oof. Yeah, that is horrific. Oh, sorry, I have to ask for scattering. We should know that because we've had it in our vocabulary. Okay, so the Babylonian exile. This is where we get the term Jews that the Jewish people are often called now. This is when they're be called Jews. Before they were always the Israelites, the Hebrews. Now they're called Jews because their religion, they're Jewish, Judaism. That's where they get it. Now, a lot of you might be familiar with this time of the Babylonian exile. For example, the book of Daniel was written at this time, and Daniel is a pretty popular, famous. You have stories of Daniel, his friends Meshach, Ashak, and Abednego being thrown into the furnace. We've got that story. We've got Daniel in the lion's den. So these, and Nebuchadnezzar, of course, the story of him going cuckoo and living outside and eating the grass and all that. All these things this was the Babylonian exile kind of time, so you might be familiar with some of those stories from it. Now, the Babylonians are not going to be the final rulers of the Jews, though. The Babylonian Empire is going to get conquered by the Persians. This is where, of course, we have that famous story where I think it was Nebuchadnezzar the Third or Balthazar. I can't remember the king's name exactly, but he's going and having this huge feast, and he says, "Oh, well, I know what we should use. We should use all of the like fancy golden things that they stole from the Temple of Solomon." And one of the things they're going to do, we're going to talk about this, I think tomorrow, is that the Hebrews do not eat pork. They consider pork unclean. I think it goes because it has a cloven foot but does not chew the cuds. It's not like a cow. I think that's the reasoning in Leviticus. But anyways, Jews don't eat pork if they are Orthodox and follow kosher rules. Well, this Babylonian king is putting pork all over these plates. And the story goes, like I said, this is all from the Torah, our primary source about this, but there's actually a secondary source, or not a secondary, another primary source talking about this exact story. Oh goodness, I have it in my Persian PowerPoint. Nabonidus, that's right. And anyways, so the king is going, he's feasting, he's eating all this pork, all this stuff off the Jews, gold and silverware. And then it's supposed to say, like, he sees a hand, just a floating hand on the wall, and it goes, Mene, Mene, Tekel Parsons, writing it on the wall. And of course, this is a sign that things are bad, because it's one of those things, like if this was a cartoon or a movie, like it would split and you'd be like, all right, so you've got this fun party, and then right outside the gates, juxtaposing it, we have the Persian army and the Medes getting led by Cyrus the Great, like banging down on there and going and attacking the Babylonian Empire, the city of Babylon. Just kind of showing like the king is having this party, completely ignoring the fact that his empire is getting conquered right at that very moment. Pretty cool. Now, King Cyrus winds up actually being super kind to our Hebrews. He is the only Gentile, meaning non-Jewish person, who actually is first given the title Messiah, Savior of the Jews. Because know what King Cyrus does? He says, you don't have to stay here if you don't want to. If you're forced to not be in your home, you can go back. In fact, King Cyrus is even going to wind up giving them money to rebuild their temple. Also during this exile is where we have a lot of the prophets that you might be familiar with, folks like Jeremiah. He's in there, folks like Elijah, Elisha, all those. But yeah, so that's the time of the Babylonian exile, where we have our Hebrews kicked out of their homeland because of first the Assyrians, then the Babylonians. And that's going to be our notes for the day, my cherubs. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Do you have any questions about what we've discussed today? Okay, seeing none. We are going to end the recording. When does the Battle of Jericho come in the picture? The Battle of Jericho was when they were going and conquering Canaan. So that would be way, way ahead of this. This would be before Saul and David. So probably, if David, we estimate, was around 1000 BC, Jericho would probably be around like 1000 or 1100 or sometime around then, so maybe 100 years before David, or so. But yeah, that's a cool story too. We didn't get to talk about that one, unfortunately.